elementary school I attended was great. And one thing I will always remember is that we were all about trading. There was always something, it seemed like, in every grade that became popular and became an item of trade. We had slap bracelets, garbage pail kids. Some of you remember garbage pail kids, baseball cards. And what I realized, though, is that trading doesn't just stop, when you're in elementary school. It actually continues throughout our entire lives. Sometimes we trade an object for an object, or an object for money, or money for an object. Trading continues with us throughout all of our lives. And the basic premise of a trade is, you have something I want, I have something you want, let's swap, let's trade. And the goal of all trading is this. The goal is that I'm looking for the best possible deal for me. In other words, I want to give you something of equal or lesser value than what I'm receiving. Like I want to give you something, and what you're giving me back, it better be worth more than what I'm giving you. And that's your goal too. Did you know that Jesus trades with us? He trades with us, but it's so different, and his goals are so different. He doesn't play by the same rules. His tone, his demeanor, everything about it is different. And not just that, we're always looking out for ourselves in a trade, but what does Jesus do? In Matthew 11, we see a trade that Jesus offers to us, where in verse 28 it says this, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened." Anybody weary? Anybody burdened today? You carry anything around as a result of all that's going on in the world today? The good news is that your burden is the beginning of your trade. Whatever's going on in your life, whatever's happening around you, that's the beginning of what Jesus says. Hey, listen, come to me with all your weariness and with all of your burdens. And the reason that's good news for you and for me is because this means this verse is for anyone who thinks, you know what, I don't get to approach God because I don't have everything all together. I don't know all the right answers. I don't know all the right Bible verses. I don't know all the right facts. I'm not the person who's necessarily worthy of God's love. Are you weary? Are you burdened? That's the beginning of your trade. And you know what Jesus offers? At the end of verse 28, Matthew chapter 11, he says, "And I will give you," his part of the transaction, "I'll give you rest." Jesus says, you have something that I want, and I have something that you want. But my goal is not like your trading goal, according to the scripture, Jesus tells us, because I can handle your burdens, you can't. Then Jesus goes farther and he defines his part of the transaction of specifically the type of rest that he's going to give us. He says, let me give you a clearer description of what you're getting in this trade. Verse 29, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And when we trade, you will find rest for your souls." Verse 30, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." See, in verse 30, when he mentioned the word yoke, this would not have been a word picture that would have been lost on a first century Jewish audience. These were many men and women with livestock, and they understood a yoke was a large, heavy wooden beam, oftentimes covered in leather, harnessed over the necks of livestock, often oxen, used to pull a really heavy load or weight. And it's like Jesus saying, hey, listen, when I look at those oxen, that reminds me of you. In that setting, Jesus wasn't talking, though, about a physical burden. He was talking about a spiritual burden or a life burden. Because, see, the religious leaders of that day, they had placed on the people all around him spiritual burdens that the people knew they couldn't possibly carry. They knew we could never measure up. We have nothing to trade with God because we've been convinced everything that we have, everything that we are is not going to ever be good enough. And Jesus knew people thought, you know what? I'm just going to give up because I don't at all measure up. I've met people like that. I felt like that in different parts of my lives. But some of you in your conversations, I know for some of you, you feel like, you know what? That's just one divorce too many. That's one sexual sin too many. That's one bad financial decision too many. That's one fill in the blank too many. I have good news for all of us who are weary and heavy burdened. Jesus says, let's trade. You give me your burdens, and I'll give you my rest. See, this is not burden removing. This is burden replacing. His yoke is easy, and his burden is light. He wants to not take away your burdens. He said, no, they're still going to be there. It's just, I want to give you my rest in the place of your burdens because I can handle them. Jesus says, let's trade. Psalm 91 says it this way: he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my rock and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge.